From hijackings to plane crashes and interviewing some of the biggest stars in the world, from your Brad Pitts to your Audra McDonalds to your Tom Cruises, Chris Fahey, live from New York, is our guest today on Take Fountain. Chris, thanks so much for coming on the show.
It's a pleasure to be here. It's lovely to see you.
So you're a senior talent producer on the Tamron Hall Show, which is a talk show out of New York. It doesn't go to air in Australia, from what I know. But your career didn't start as a talent producer. I mean, you started with hard news, right?
Yeah, I went to college at Fordham University in the Bronx, New York, and we had our own 50,000-watt radio station, which is a big radio station. So we had great carriage. And I was the news director by my third year, and I went out and covered everything from, the changing of a street light to the, putting a street light on a busy street at Rockefeller Plaza, which everybody knows,
Yeah.
to covering the Yankees winning the World Series and getting a ticker tape parade, downtown Manhattan. So we did everything. And along the way, I always read the arts and leisure section of the Times first on Sundays, and on weekdays, I was always drawn to the arts. I'm a big reader. So that to me was the goal. To be honest, I always wanted to meet the Beatles. So this was the way I was going to get closest enough to meet the Beatles. And in the end, I met Paul, George, and Ringo,
You did
but
meet
not
them.
John. I met
Oh,
all but John, who was my chief love. He was killed while I was in college, and I ended up writing his obituary. It was the
ah,
saddest day.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Have you had anything to do with Paul McCartney in recent years?
I've interviewed him in recent years. I actually ran into him at a restaurant one night over the Christmas holiday a couple of years ago in New York. His wife was carrying, Nancy was carrying a big umbrella. And as we walked past, I said to my friend, an older gentleman, "Oh my God, that's Paul McCartney." But we didn't bother him. We let him go. I actually rode up in an elevator with him at Rockefeller Center at one point and got to tell him it was just the two of us, no security guards or anything. And got to tell him that I had seen him Wings Over America in '76 at Madison Square Garden with Linda, and interviewed him a couple of times with Linda, and just thank him, for his career. And I also did manage to tell him how much I miss John, and he said he missed him too.
Oh, that's so such an opportunity. A guy I know had a very funny experience here. He got into an elevator and there was a very familiar face, and
Yeah.
he was new to LA, and he honestly thought that it was somebody that he'd known in his past, and that it had been a friend of his, but he couldn't for the life of him remember the name. And when he got out of the elevator, he realized it was Jennifer Aniston.
Oh, that's funny. So she was a friend indeed, right? She was in fact a friend.
Exactly
That's
right.
funny.
I think the funniest thing, to be in a position like you're in, because, as the talent producer, a talent booker books the stars to go on the various shows. The talent producer can wind up doing the interviews, or at least writing the questions, right? But you have different exposure to different types of stars. When you first started your job, was it for people? Is that where you first started?
No, I started in writing news. I wrote for WPIX TV in New York. I wrote, it was during the late '80s and early '90s, a time of plane crashes and hijackings, and it was really it was very quiet in the beginning until all the trouble started in the Middle East. So, but again, I always tended my joy, my pleasure, my dessert was in the arts and entertainment. So I gravitated toward that. I don't think, certainly when I started, I didn't think that I would necessarily be able to spend my life doing that. Although the first story I wrote in college was about the trouble that Sid Vicious was in from the Sex Pistols, and then of course he killed his girlfriend and died. So that was my very first story to write. But as a booker and a producer, you spend a lot of time begging people to please give us your star and let them talk to our talent. And who are, sometimes if I do a red carpet, if I do a movie arrival, or arrivals even I did a U2 concert one year in Las Vegas when they released the pop album. I'm a huge U2 fan. I'm Irish, and that was great fun, but then I get to do the interviews myself. Oftentimes you get to do pre-interviews with people. So while I never met John, I have talked to Julian Lennon on the phone and got to share my love for his father and ask him some questions. So
That,
yeah, you
was
do
there
kind
a,
of everything.
was there a moment in your career where you could go either one way or the other, where it was either, okay, I'm going to go with news or I'm going to go with arts and entertainment? Can you
Yeah,
remember that moment?
yeah, I was at CBS for 10 years. And while I was there, I came in, it was just after Lucille Ball died. And I had loved Lucy. I would love to have met her, but I didn't get to. And I came in and I was doing well and succeeding. And they pulled me in and said, we really think you should go hard news. This is a hard news network, and there'd be more opportunities for you here. And I said, give me a day to think about it. And I thought about it, and my heart just wasn't in it as much. I don't think I made a mistake. I mean, I've met everyone but John Lennon, really, and I've gotten to do some pretty great things along the way with people like Madonna, and I had great conversations with Mick Jagger and things like that. So yeah, I'm glad I went the way I did. I mean, and hard news can be so sad. I mean, I would have a hard time covering COVID through the Broadway scene is so sad. I mean, there's a lot more joy at the Oscars or the Grammys or the Emmys, or just being the first to see a movie in the whole country. That's great
Yeah.
fun.
Speaking, just going back a little bit, you mentioned I Love Lucy, and news out this week that Nicole Kidman and Javier Bardem are going to be the Lucy and Desi. What do you think of that
Right.
casting?
I think Nicole Kidman can do anything. My first thought was that Javier Bardem is too tall to play Desi. Don't you think?
Well,
Desi was a
I mean,
genius, but a little guy, and Nicole,
I,
Lucy was taller.
I thought Desi had that movie star skin, and
Yeah,
I just don't see that same look. But it depends at what age they're going to be playing them as well.
and
Because
let's
I
face it, makeup and prosthetics.
Yeah,
They can do a lot with makeup and prosthetics.
like what they did with
You
Gary
know,
Oldman,
right.
in the speech, right? I mean, that was just amazing.
Right. And
Uh,
certainly Nicole is so long and lean. She could play Lucy. I feel bad for Deborah Messing because she had earlier been cast, and she says she's going to give it a run to try to get it. She's a natural redhead, and she really wanted to play Lucy. She dressed up as Lucy on Will and Grace and had really hoped to take that part. So she was disappointed.
you must have heard a lot over the years about the disappointments that go on and the vaccine stuff. Can you think of a story where something like that, came into your orbit?
Well, oftentimes when you talk to celebrities, you'll hear them talk about how roles they were up for and didn't get, or parts they might have had and didn't pan out, or things they didn't go for and maybe should have. I remember interviewing Stephen Stills once, from Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, a
Yeah,
band I loved. And he was great friends with Neil Young. And I was interviewing David and Stephen and Nash, Graham Nash. And Stephen told me that he had been up to be one of the monkeys, hey, hey, it's the monkeys.
yeah,
And he
yeah.
had a rehearsal and he couldn't get out of it. So he ended up sending his roommate at the time, a guy named Peter Tork. And that's
No,
how Peter Tork became a monkey. Yeah. It's crazy, right?
I love that story. I had never heard that before.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. And yet Steven does not seem to have the demeanor to be a monkey. He's not that goofy. He's always been more serious. So, but that was something. And, they often will talk jokingly about their flops, you know, ones they probably should have skipped.
Right.
But, you know, yeah, I mean, there's always stories.
There's a lot of that that goes on. So
Yeah.
you got very close to Madonna, if not in bed with her. I'm sorry to use that.
No, yeah.
Um,
No, she's in too great shape. Her publicist, the woman who used to be her publicist for years and years, Madonna looked at her as a surrogate mother, is a wonderful woman named Liz Rosenberg.
yeah,
And Liz knew she could trust me and work with me and often gave me scoops. Madonna's going to open the MTV Awards. Madonna, when she fell off her horse that time, which really ended her marriage to Guy Ritchie. Liz gave us the story first at Access Hollywood, and we went with it and shared it with USA Today. When Madonna and her daughter Lourdes were starting a clothing line, Liz said to me, "Bring your daughter with me." I have a daughter who's now 23, but at the time was about 11. and was kind of shy at that time and didn't love to go when mom went to work. But I said, "Come on, it's Madonna, you can go," and so she did.
I like,
She
come on,
did.
it's Madonna.
Yeah, yeah. I can tell you plenty of stories about that. I took her to the Mamma Mia premiere, and both Rita Wilson, who produced the film, and Meryl Streep kind of tried to engage her in how much she enjoyed the movie. And she was reading a book on the premiere line. She wasn't really up to chatting. She was busy. She's very studious. She's lightened up. Anyway, so I brought her, and they Lourdes and Madonna actually picked out an outfit for Material Girl, and she was dressed up, and it was really such a thrill and a treat. And I have to say, Lourdes was very well raised. I know she's very close to Madonna, and what a nice kid she was. She was a couple of years older than my daughter, dating Timothy Chalamet at the time. I later found out, the young actor. And they she was just very they were very kind, and we still have the outfit, of course.
Yes. It must be incredibly difficult because you get into this because you want to sing or act or do all of those things, and although you have an understanding that you have a responsibility to your fans and so on, there's so much information that people get their hands on, now more than ever,
Although
the
there are
public
some, I would have to. There are some people who manage to keep their lives quiet when they want to.
yeah,
You have to admit that. I mean, we don't really know much about what kind of a parent Sharon Stone is, or, in terms of Nicole Kidman's relationship with her two daughters, we only know what she tells us. I mean,
yes,
everybody has good times and bad times. I'm a single parent. I know that with their kids. But, some people like Madonna, tend to lay it all on the line and run videos of their kids singing and dancing and everything else. And not everybody does that, so you do have some control. Sometimes you don't, but you can if you choose to. We don't know much about Julianne Moore. She
right,
may appear kind of uninteresting, not because she's a bad actress, she's a wonderful actress,
yeah,
but because she doesn't post pictures of her kids all day long.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And I actually shot a volunteer event with her and a basketball player in New York around Thanksgiving one time, and she was lovely and perfectly happy to talk to me, and talk about her involvement in the charity. And I could shoot her bagging, groceries, but she asked me not to shoot her children, which of course I was totally fine with.
yeah, yeah.
So
You,
it's a matter of how much they want to give.
looking over your career, the way the information comes into your hands now, or into all of our lives now via social media, do you have feelings about that? Do you think it's better or worse than it used to be, or do you think the access is too much?
Um, I certainly don't understand why anyone would do anything in public, let alone even pick their nose, because there are cameras everywhere. And it constantly amazes me when you hear somebody's OD'd. Like there was somebody who OD'd just yesterday, a 24-year-old mega zillionaire son of Stephanie Seymour. And somebody's going to have that on camera, because every hotel, every hallway, everything has a camera in it. So
Yeah,
I think it's gotten much more difficult. I'll tell you, there was a time just before the internet exploded, we would be at Rockefeller Plaza at Access Hollywood and literally get a phone call from a woman named Angelina Jolie. And she would be telling us that she was going to be at Saks shopping if we wanted to shoot some video.
right.
So that's how, they were interested in controlling. That was before she had all the kids. I think she just had one. Um, but, they can control it like that by telling you where to go and what to shoot.
Yeah,
I mean, there are a lot of people who do a lot of things privately and aren't all over the place, but other people like to live out loud. Remember what Warren Beatty said to Madonna in the movie, the black and white movie, Truth or Dare? He said, "You don't even want to live if there aren't cameras on you,"
yeah.
you know?
Well, if I said to a friend yesterday, she was Skyping me from Australia. She said, I'm about to go and cook dinner. I said, take a photo or it didn't happen.
Exactly. Even my kid will send me pictures of her and the ribs she and her boyfriend are sharing. And I'm kind of like, I'd rather see your face than what you're having for dinner, you know?
I know, I
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
You mentioned Broadway briefly. You are in New York. What's your experience been of COVID, firstly? And then I want to talk to you about your Broadway experiences.
Well, I've been lucky, so blessed to be in New York and to have covered Broadway for over 35 years. I mean, I've pretty much seen everything, and that's two great seats, before a show opens generally. I've seen a lot of performers kind of grow up on the stage. I saw 3 shows the week that Broadway closed, the week before they closed. I saw 6, which was great. I saw The Girl from the North Country, which was a show based on Bob Dylan's music. And I saw uh, Little Pill, Jagged Little Pill, based on the
Okay.
Alanis
Yeah.
Morissette.
Right.
And only did I find out afterward that backstage, 2 of the 3 plays were absolutely full of COVID stricken people, that everybody was getting sick. We did not interact with the stars. They weren't collecting money after the shows or anything, as they
Yeah.
often will
Yeah.
be.
Yeah.
But just to think that the whole theater could have potentially been exposed to that is kind of disturbing. It seems very disingenuous and kind of careless, in a country where now in LA, 1 out of every 3 people has COVID, and they say 60% of the cases of COVID have been up since election day, November 3rd. That's pretty disturbing,
Yeah.
you know. Um, but I will tell you one story that really hit me. There was a guy who was the original costumer for Wicked, and very talented man. And then he moved on, and he was the costumer for To Kill a Mockingbird.
Right.
And one of the last things he did, I guess in February of last year, was he did the costumes for the one time only performance with Aaron Sorkin in attendance, and Ed Harris was in the lead of To Kill a Mockingbird at Madison Square Garden. 20,000 public school students in New York City got to come and see the show, many of whom had never been to a show before themselves, 7th and 8th graders. And it was extraordinary. I was lucky enough to be there, standing in the back. Um, but then he got COVID and really came within a whisper of dying. And his wife would sing to him and talk to him every day. His 3 kids, they dropped him off to get a shot. They thought maybe he had the flu, maybe something, and he was there for months. A lovely man, and they tried some experimental medication, and that was what saved him. But one of the nurses sang one of the songs from Wicked, and sang it to him every day while he was in a coma, while he was on a ventilator, while he was not really functioning independently at all. And when he came out of it finally and survived, and I mean, I cried reading the story, and I'm not a wimp. I don't cry that easily, but it really tore me apart. And we had him on the Tamron Hall Show. They sang it to him and clapped as he was wheeled out of the hospital, by the nurse and into the arms of his wife and kids. Just a normal guy from New Jersey with a family, and he was the costume designer, and he got so sick. They
Yeah.
used some experimental treatment from Israel, some plasma, and that was what helped him out.
Thank
So,
God.
but it has
Um,
absolutely devastated Broadway.
yeah. I
There's
mean,
no Broadway.
I follow Be an Arts Hero on social media. I mean, this will go around the world, this podcast, but the Australian arts industry alone is worth $111 billion annually, economically,
Yeah,
and yet has
right,
received zero support from the government. And
right.
similarly, the arts industry here. I mean, what do people think happens? That the theatre is not just the people you see on stage. What do people think happens to all of those people behind the scenes who are now without work?
And they're not all celebrities who are in big unions and take away big money. They're the ushers. They're the guys who sell you your program. They're the people who help you when your seats are mixed up and sell you the tickets at the gate. It's
Yeah,
so disturbing. Well, they're saying that our new president Biden, God
yeah,
willing, is going to try to help take care of the arts to some extent.
yeah, yeah. Which is going to have
Yeah,
to
I
happen.
wish the same for you guys.
Yeah, right. Well,
And,
we can but hope. I mean, I think greater humanity is probably the call, right? Um,
well, we need the theater. You know.
we Let's talk about some of the people that you knew before they were who they became. People like Andy Cohen, people like Jerry Seinfeld, and people like Audrey
Okay.
Gold. Tell me your stories of
Oh,
those
who? Oh, yeah. Young Andrew Cohen. We who know him longer call him Andrew. He was my assistant. First, he started as an intern at CBS This Morning. He came in with a big ponytail, and he was full of fun. He was the same person he is now. He essentially hasn't changed. He's a kid from St. Louis, came from a well off family, has a sister, and always had very good friends. I know a number of his oldest friends who are still good friends. And he was the guy that everybody wanted to be his best friend.
Right.
So he worked with me, and I hope he learned a few things from me. I know I learned a few things from him. And then he went into Bravo and created the Housewives. I'm not a fan; it's just not my kind of thing. But they exploded, and now he's got a show on Sirius, which he's just doing so fabulously. And he's great to me still. If I email him, I hear back from him. I love looking at pictures of his little boy, and I will say that he really is a good, decent person and somebody you'd want to call a friend.
Right.
So I'm very happy for his success. Sometimes you might say, "Oh my God, he was my assistant. How did that happen?" But for him, he was somebody who I wanted to know the publicists. He wanted to know the stars, and they all adore him. Cher loves him. Madonna loves him, and I'm very happy for him. Yeah,
And
I used to
what
work
about
with him.
Jerry Seinfeld?
Jerry Seinfeld was a young comedian, and I was up visiting my best friend, my college roommate, up in Syracuse, New York, and the singer Carolyn Moss was doing a show up there. Poor Carolyn, nobody kind of really knows about her, but we got there early and we saw the comedian at the beginning, and he was knock you on the floor funny, and he was very New York, and I'm very New York, and his name was Jerry Seinfeld. So when I was at CBS this morning, then, and my reporter and anchor, I won't mention his name, said I booked him to come in. He was doing a show called The Seinfeld Chronicles. It was on Wednesday night. And people said, "Why are we doing this guy? Who is this guy?" He'd only been on 2 or 3 times. The Today Show hadn't put him on yet. And I said, trust me on this. This guy is funny. So years later, I was in an apartment near his apartment. He has, a floor or so. And Billy Bush, whom I adore, was doing an interview with him for Access. I helped build that relationship. You get to do a lot of things behind the scenes and kind of create relationships with people. And Billy and Seinfeld have been solid since. And anyway, so I mentioned to him that I had seen him with Carolyn Moss, and he said, "Yeah, whatever happened to her?" But none of us really knew. But he was
I
amazing.
I remember when I saw a piece that he did about why do pajamas have pockets.
Uh-huh.
It was the funniest thing. I mean, I had never thought, why is there a pocket on your pajamas? What are you going to take to bed with you? Right? You're not going
Maybe
to
your
take
rosary
them.
beads. What did he say? What was the answer?
Oh, I can't remember. I was laughing so hard. I mean, my belly fell
Right.
out. I thought I thought he was so funny. And uh, I do comedy, I do storytelling and stand up, but more in the storytelling vein. And, um, and one of the things that I talk to young comedians about when they're first starting is that, they're really dirty, they're really filthy. And the women
Yeah.
are just filthier than the men now. And I asked her, why do you tell stories like that? Oh, well, they're funny. I said, but are they really funny? And I show them this piece of Seinfeld and say, look at this guy. He's talking about pajamas and pockets, and it's hysterical. Like I use him as an example. Or Robin Williams and the bit about golf, which is the
Right.
funniest piece of comedy. I mean,
Right.
look it up,
I love
everyone.
Robin Williams.
Just
I
YouTube
spent a
golf
lot of time with
videos.
him. Yeah.
Right? Oh, how
Yeah.
blessed
What
you
a great
were.
guy. Yeah,
Oh,
I know. I know.
amazing.
He really was a sweetheart. I will say about that, I listened recently to a podcast with a comedian, a male comedian, and he was talking about poop. And it was on WTF, a podcast I love with Mark Maron.
Yes.
And I just thought, I don't want to hear about poop. So I
Yeah.
just turned it off. And I will usually just skip the parts I don't care about, but it was just like gross. I don't want to hear this.
Yeah.
I agree with you, I'm saying.
Yeah.
And Seinfeld's wife is lovely. She really does cook for the family every night. They try to sit down and have a meal. He collects the phones at the table. His oldest daughter had gone off to school at Duke, so she was away. But they're like try to be a normal family. And his sister works with his foundation. They send underprivileged kids to college,
Yeah.
so that's nice to know. Yeah.
I want to
And
go back.
Audra McDonald, go ahead.
Exactly. I was just going to say,
Audra,
let's talk about Audra McDonald.
well, there's one of the Broadway people I saw very early on. My mother loved the show Carousel, as do I. So I took her to, it was at Lincoln Center to see the show. And there was talk about this one woman, this new woman, sorry,
That's
this
okay.
new
We call
young
it
woman.
Brad Pitt.
No, not just, yeah. Hi, I'm doing an interview. I have to call you back, okay? there was this new young woman, sorry, apologies, um,
And
that everybody talked about how it was colorblind casting.
yeah,
Carousel is set in the years ago in the mid plains, that sort of area. She played the best friend, and she had one of the most beautiful solos, but she was black
mm,
because Audra's black.
mm,
But in the play, she had always been played by a white woman. So as soon as Audra opened her mouth, you knew you were looking at history being made. She was so phenomenal. And the only thing I would say is that I wish she had played the lead actress, because she was that good. And if they truly were being colorblind, wow, she should have been the lead. But it was, she always remembers that I remembered her from that. And that's nice, when you interview somebody who does remember you.
if
Yeah.
you were having a group of people over for dinner and had a big enough apartment to seat 10 people, who would
10.
you have over of all the people you've met and those you didn't? So let's stick John Lennon
Yeah.
at the head, right?
Right. I would want John Lennon at the head of the table. I would have my mother too, because I miss her so much. Tom Cruise, I know people get on him for his religion, but one of the things about this country is that you can choose to believe what you believe and who you believe, and that's your business. I'm Irish. My family came over here. We were being persecuted for our religion. So I feel it's not my place to judge him or judge anyone else. So there's three. I might have Nicole, because she's recently started talking about Tom, which is interesting to me since they had such a bad falling out. Um, I love Tom Brady, who's a quarterback for the Patriots. I know he's a sports guy, but 10 is a lot. Maybe some authors. Could I have some authors? I love
Absolutely.
Anna. What's her name? I can see the name of the book, Anna Pritchard.
I can't
Are you a
believe
big
I asked
reader?
you this question because, I am so bad with names that I'm
Yeah,
like,
and I'm pretty
oh,
good
I'll
with them,
text you
but
at 3 in the morning. Yeah.
yeah. Well, you know what? Clint Eastwood actually flirted with me once, which was a great thrill. So I'd want to bring him back and see if he remembered me. I mean, I know he's an old guy, but he's Clint Eastwood, you know? So I'd have him there. And a couple of my regular friends, not name people, just to fill it out. My friend Phil and my friend Polly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Someone to pour the sparkling water or the wine, and somebody to serve the food, right?
Well, they'd want to get in on the conversation. Phil is Anna Patchett. That's what I'm thinking of. Ann Patchett, the author.
Right.
I like her very much. Yeah, and she's
That's
still alive. Yeah.
Chris, it's getting late for you there in New York, so I'm not going to take up too much more of your time. I wanted to say thank you so much for coming on the show. Really
Oh, it was
appreciate
a
it.
pleasure speaking with you, really. Thank
Such
you.
lovely stories. Just wonderful. I feel like
I've been very blessed. The problem is that once you tend to hit a certain age, they kind of tend to want to push you out. And I feel as interested and engaged and as able to do things as ever. So hopefully that, I'd like to run a long time. Somebody said to me, well, what will you do when you retire? Who wants to retire?
who wants to
Do you want to
retire?
retire?
I'm not retired.
What is
No,
there to do? I don't
no,
golf.
right?
I'm not a
Say
golfer.
mahjong.
So,
I'm going backwards in age, so I'm not ever going to retire. Yeah,
oh,
hold
good
me.
for you there. Then.
Chris
Right.
Fahey, I hope COVID is over soon so that I can meet you face to face when I come to New York.
The feeling's mutual. Maybe we can all go see a play
That'd be
or a
wonderful.
musical. All right.
Okay.
God bless.
Thanks,
Thank
Chris. God
you. Pleasure.
You've been listening to Take Fountain with Ella James.
Available at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or your favorite podcast player. You can also stream on demand at Bytes.com.
This has been another quality podcast production from Bytes.com.